Hey guys, what's happening? JC with Big Game Real Estate. Today I'm going to go over a deal that we have live right now. It refers to one of the previous videos we did about choosing the right professionals and how, when you don't do that, that can really kill even the easiest of sales and potentially lose you a lot of millions of dollars. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the rundown of what we have, guys. We're working the property, we're involved in the sale of it, and basically it was a cash purchase. Freestanding building, a couple $1,000,000. Buyer put down a couple $100,000 in deposits, and they created a contract. And part of the contingencies of this contract was that the seller would get an additional approval for something with the building. Okay, and the seller agreed that they would go get that approval. They felt they had a very good chance. They signed the purchase contract. There was an amount of time that was allotted for the seller to receive that approval, and they went after it. As the approvals were going on, they met with the town, and the town did give them an approval. However, it was not the same approval that was written on the contract. So the buyer's counsel, who was very lazy, did not communicate well with the seller's counsel. Oftentimes there was large delays in time, months at a time, okay, where no communication happened or the wrong communication happened. They reached out to the seller's counsel, and I believe it was fairly obvious that the buyer was aware. They stated the approvals that they did receive. The buyer responded with a couple more requests, which the seller met. The buyer asked the seller to vacate the property of the existing tenant, which he did. So now they are losing money. And the buyer's attorney scheduled not one, not two, 4 closings in which the buyer has missed. So what does that mean? Well, now what the buyer is saying is the buyer's trying to get out of purchasing the deal. It's been a couple of years now that this deal has been under contract with the delays. The buyer feels that, probably feels that he overpaid for this property, and he's trying to get out of it by saying, hey, you didn't get the approvals. You didn't meet the requests of the contract. And it doesn't have to be approvals, guys. It could just be requests. And the seller is obviously stating, yes, I agree that this is not what the contract states, but we told you, you agreed, and you continue to move forward with the deal. Now, in my opinion, the seller has a very valid point here. However, the buyer also has a very valid point of this is not what the contract states. So what does that mean, guys? Number one, if you're ever in a position, whether buying or selling, and there's an ongoing deal that you're negotiating, it's under contract, and there's a material change in the deal, you need to have your attorneys amend that contract, make an addition to that contract that reflects the change. And that has to be added into the contract for your own protection. Now, in most scenarios, this probably wouldn't work out that way. I think the buyer is trying to take advantage of the seller. That's my personal opinion. But if it does go to litigation, that will be left to a judge to decide. And if it's left to a judge to decide, there will be a lot of lost time on everyone's part, except the attorneys because they're getting paid. There'll be some lost money, undoubtedly, on both people's part. And again, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Seller has an attorney who's not communicating. Seller has an attorney who's not being aggressive. So buyer rightfully assumes, hey, the seller just probably doesn't care about this deal. And time passes, and now the seller has to hire a new attorney. Now this attorney has to be brought up to speed. Now they have to deal with the buyer's attorney, who of course says, hey, look, that's not the agreements that I had with the previous attorney. And for lack of a better term, they're in an argument. And someone's going to win, and they're probably both going to lose a lot of money. Now, the buyer may lose their deposit. The seller could sue the buyer if the judge rules for the full amount of the sale. If the judge rules in favor of the buyer, the seller may be left with nothing. And the judge may say, hey, you should have amended the contract regardless of what agreements may or may not be in place, what assumed agreements may or may not be in place based on the verbiage of the email. So it's still yet to be determined. And here's how this really messes you up, by the way. So the buyer is claiming that the seller is in breach. So technically, this property is under contract until it's no longer under contract. Can the seller go and get additional buyers lined up? Sure, they could. But if they enter into a contract with those buyers, they are definitely within breach of the original contract. And the buyer can certainly, sue for damages and request the deposit back. So again, guys, it doesn't matter if you have a commercial attorney or if you're doing a resi attorney. If they're not performing the task and they're not responding in a timely manner, you have to get them off the project, because you could wind yourself up into a situation months or years later where not only do you not have an agreement, but you may lose a buyer. And if the market changes during the time frame of that deal, your property may not be worth the same amount. And this could be true on a commercial deal. This could be true on a residential deal, okay, where markets change a little bit faster. So again, guys, make sure you're using the right professionals. And if they're not getting the job done, don't be afraid to give them a warning. And if they don't oblige, replace them. Have a good one, guys. See you on the next one.